My name is David Theroux. I've had the privilege of being the founder and president of the Independent Institute, and we're so delighted to have you with us tonight in celebrating 30 years of advancing ideas into impact. You'll learn more about that this evening, and we're so pleased that you could be with us. For those of you new to the Independent Institute, Independent is a bit different from the run-of-the-mill think tank. We commission nonpartisan, in-depth studies of the root causes of and innovative solutions to major economic and social issues and problems. We produce authoritative books and other publications that are widely disseminated through cutting-edge transmedia outreach. 30 years ago, we founded Independent to examine the actual nature and consequences of government policy. But instead of succumbing to popular political biases, trends, phobias, and moral ambiguities, we are ever mindful that reason, free will, goodness, justice, and liberty are not illusions. Indeed, they are intrinsic and objective truths, non-negotiable presuppositions upon which human inquiry, the rule of law, and free civilization rest. We seek to explore such matters and address important questions that might otherwise be ignored, including ones normally considered out of the box, or controversial, or politically incorrect, but which may be crucial to our understanding and in the process aim to get at real answers and lasting solutions. We welcome you to participate, and we want to get more acquainted. In the course of our work, we take special interest in recognizing individuals whose contributions are so unusual, so noteworthy, and so effective that they merit special attention and serve as models for all of us. Tonight's honorees are especially exemplary. Tim Draper, Yeonmi Park, and Vernon Smith. The contributions of each of them are not measured by fame or by fortune, but by the enduring value and integrity of the ideas they have advanced and championed. But before we begin, I want to note that in making tonight's dinner possible, the assistance of many wonderful people has been crucial. First of all, I want to thank the distinguished individuals who have served as co-chairs: Bob Alspaugh, Bill Draper, John Hagel, Ken Hecht, Phil Hudner, Pitch Johnson, Jennifer Johnson, Kevin Leader, David Teese, and Lee Teese. Tonight's event has been made possible by our many generous supporters and sponsors, and you will see their names on our screens and in your printed program. I want to especially recognize my invaluable assistant, Alicia Luther, who has been command central for all things gala, in addition to handling her already full load, and she's done so with grace and good humor. And tonight's event truly reflects the extraordinary efforts there's Alicia. And tonight's event truly reflects the extraordinary efforts of the entire committed and enterprising team of the Independent Institute. And I'd like to ask all the Independent team members if they would please stand. I also want to thank the Independent's Board of Director members who are present this evening, if they would please stand. Gil Collins, John Hagel, Phil Hudner, Gary Schlaubaum, Susan Solinsky, Dieter Tede, David Teese, and my favorite, the beautiful, brilliant, charming, and ever-loving Mary Theroux, my wife. Please also note in the printed program on your table, tonight's schedule is divided into 4 segments. The first 3 of which are dinner courses with 1 course dedicated to each honoree, and the food is specifically designated for that honoree. We will break between courses for each segment, and the evening will culminate with a lively panel discussion of their honorees with our MC, P.J. O'Rourke. I would now like to call on Reverend Alan Jones, Dean Emeritus of Grace Cathedral here in San Francisco, who will give us the invocation.
O God, we thank you that you have called us to freedom in a generous and gracious vision of communion. We thank you for bringing us to this demanding and unnerving moment in the human adventure. And we thank you for the people we honor this evening, for their vision, persistence, and courage as we take up the task of nurturing and deepening of a free community in our time. We thank you that this institute shows us that the road to freedom is hazardous yet hopeful, grounded in a generosity of spirit and sound principle. Help us to resist the infantilizing of politics, the abuse of public discourse, and the use of little truths in the service of a great lie. Help us to resist with strength and grace those who would exploit anger and resentment rather than mobilize healing and celebration in the building of a free society. And so we thank you that our liberty bell is cracked, reminding us that the defense of freedom is never over and that we all stand under judgment. We all have our own peculiar ignorances and blindnesses. All are in the need of forgiveness. And finally, you show us that the world is a wedding. To be human is to be betrothed to each other in a covenant for better or for worse, called to embrace the truth of the free communion at the heart of things, even as we pray for those who have lost homes and even lives in the fierce hurricanes and earthquakes ravaging our country and our world. Above all, help us to see that to be free is to be answerable to you, whose service is perfect freedom. May it be so. Amen.
Well, I don't have to tell the people in this room what the Independent Institute is and what it does, or how wonderful it's been 30 years of the Independent Institute being what it is and doing what it does. Instead, what I would like to ask you to do is a little thought experiment. What if we didn't have an Independent Institute think tank? What if we were dependent for our insights and our understandings on a thoughtless tank? Actually, we've got one. It's called Congress. Actually, we've got more than one. There's California State Legislature, San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I could go on. The Independent Institute's mission is to boldly advance peaceful, prosperous, and free societies grounded in a commitment to human worth and dignity. Now, what about other institutions that boldly advance using terror, war, and police powers, impoverished and oppressed societies grounded in a commitment to make human life stink? There are plenty of those other institutions out there. It's a fact that might seem to discourage supporters of the Independent Institute. Not that we are discouraged, Brave people don't get discouraged. And it takes a lot of bravery to support clear thinking. Bravery to be logical in the face of the absurd, to be informed in the face of ignorance, to be right in the face of wrong. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers and sisters, thoughtless people at home in bed with their bad political ideas shall think themselves accursed they were not here tonight. And I have just one thing to say to supporters of the Independent Institute now more than ever. Now more than ever. I say that because of what people have said to me. People have said, PJ, isn't it a terrible time to be a libertarian right now? And I understand what they mean. But none of the bad things we're experiencing make it a terrible time to be a libertarian. They make it a necessary time to be a libertarian. When your house is on fire, that's not a terrible time to be a volunteer fireman. You know? Our job as independent libertarians is to teach the world that individual liberty, individual dignity, and individual responsibility are the best safeguards against the failures of bloated political overreach. Good things are made by good things are made by free individuals in free association with other individuals, and notice that that's how we make babies, okay? Individual freedom is about bringing things together. Politics is about dividing things up. Politicians would have us make babies by putting the woman over on this side of the room and the man over on that side of the room, while the government stands in the middle taxing sperm and eggs. Goodness itself is an individual trait. Now think about the death of Socrates, you know? What do you think would have happened if that charming old bloke Socrates, lovable, eccentric, full of silly questions, if Socrates had gone around Athens asking each individual Athenian, should I be condemned to death? Individuals would never have killed Socrates. They had to become a mob first. And what always comes to the fore in a mob? Mobsters. The alternative right in KKK bed sheets. You know, they're such knuckleheads, I bet all they can find is fitted bed sheets in floral patterns, you know? Or the Antifa, wearing their little black ninja jammies, you know, and expressing their First Amendment rights by smashing windows over in Berkeley, you know? The libertarian is the anti-mob. The anti-mob is you. And we have to accept the fact that clear thinking based on the value of human individuality, it's a hard sell. People want easy answers. There are intelligent answers. There are correct answers. There are even obvious answers. But politically, there are no easy answers. And that's why at the Independent Institute we have a political philosophy that fundamentally opposes politics. And yet it's necessary to engage with politics. Politics is the question of an individual's relationship to society. Now, the question of an individual's relationship to society is, judging by the state of politics at the moment, it's a bad question. And judging by politics past and present, the question has a bad answer for individuals. The Independent Institute exists to change the answer and the question. Individuality is a fact. Politics is an intellectual abstraction, a way of thinking about persons collectively as if a bunch of people were a single thing, the cohesion of individuals into a group, the people, the nation, the state, the mob. Politics is imaginary. Never mind that this fictitious concept can cause oppression and slaughter and war, and occasionally benefits. I mean, imagination is a powerful thing. Individuals, alas, are not so powerful, but individuals aren't fictitious. Every individual is actual, with actual needs and wants, actual joys and sorrows, actual freedoms and responsibilities. People are real. Politics is an idea. There are names for the kind of thinking that regards ideas as more important than people, and one name is ISIS. When the ancient Hebrews rebelled against bondage in Egypt, they may have regarded themselves as a people, a nation, a state, a cohesion of individuals into a collective group. God said no. And then God gave the Hebrews a timeout, and he delivered his 10 commandments. And every one of those commandments was a commandment to the individual. You, the specific individual you shalt do this, you shalt not do that. I'm talking to you, no group discounts. Closest God gets to collectivism in the 10th commandment is the 10th commandment. Closest God gets to collectivism. 10th commandment, when he forbids the Hebrews from practicing it. God says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass. God said, don't go staking a claim on other people's asses, mind your own. You know? Some people think the Independent Institute's a political think tank. It's not, and it's an anti-political think tank. We're not here to fix politics. I take that back. We are here to fix politics, the way you fix a cat, the way you spay a dog, the way you castrate a dangerous bull. We mean to tame these political SOBs. We're going to teach them not to beg at the table, teach them not to bark at the moon, teach them to quit licking each other's, you know what I mean. We're going to teach them to heal. We're going to teach them to come when they are called, you know. We're going to teach them domestic policy. Stay off the furniture. No politics on my bed. We're going to teach them foreign policy. Stop making messes on other people's lawns. We're going to teach them to roll over and play dead because we're going to teach them term limits. When we toss our political power to a politician, that politician is going to bring our political power right back here and drop it at our feet. Good boy, now get back in the kennel. Thank you.
I started out primarily doing experiments in markets. And my first appointment was at Purdue University. And I was teaching principles of economics, and I realized that there was nothing in my education that enabled me to understand the connection between economic theory, supply and demand theory, theory of markets, and what people actually do in markets, the decisions they make day by day. My mother was a socialist and had a Harvard education. I wasn't prepared to see markets work that well.
Probably my interest in economics was motivated originally by my experiences of the 30s, but my initial idea was to study science and engineering. But as a senior, I had a course, Introduction to Economics, and it amazed me. I didn't know that there was a field that involved kind of a rigorous intellectual treatment of this topic I wasn't aware of.
Economics used to be a non-experimental science. Nowadays, experiments are routinely conducted in specialized economic labs all over the world. The elegant methods you have developed are invaluable components of the empirical toolbox in economics.
There's a quotation by Wittgenstein that really summarizes Vernon. There's no more light in a genius than in any other honest man, except that he has a particular kind of lens to focus that light into a burning point.
Vernon is someone who could never fake it to make it. Vernon could never do that. Vernon is so completely sincere and authentic that he couldn't be any other way. Everything he says is from his heart. He doesn't tell fibs. He's my hero.
Good evening. Good evening. Tonight, we celebrate great experiments and a great experimentalist. Born in Wichita, Kansas, Vernon Smith's early life was on a small farm which sustained his family modestly through the Great Depression. Vernon worked for Boeing as a teenager, helping to troubleshoot the gun system on the B-29, the world's first high-altitude bomber. He managed to get into Caltech and learn from great minds like Linus Pauling, Robert Oppenheimer, and rub shoulders with Robert Millikan and other legendary figures. Vernon went on to do a PhD in economics at Harvard. His first teaching post was at Purdue, where he began using experiments in the classroom as pedagogic tools to help students understand market processes. This was to become a major focus of his subsequent research. At Purdue, Vernon conducted classroom experiments with his students to see how and when markets would clear. Sometimes his experiments confirmed economic theory, sometimes they challenged it. Vernon Smith and Daniel Kahneman, as you just saw, won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2002. He received his prize for, quote, having established laboratory experiments as a tool in empirical analysis, especially in the study of alternative market mechanisms. When I first started studying economics, we were told that unlike the physical sciences, economists would never be able to perform controlled experiments. Vernon Smith changed that view, and experimental economics is now a flourishing subfield of economics. It's being used to study and inform electricity pricing, airplane landing slots, spectrum auctions, the properties of Dutch and English auctions, and many other things. But at the end of the day, Vernon is an empiricist. He's not an ideologue, but wants to know what works and what doesn't. His work almost always showed that markets could solve problems without government intervention. The Nobel Prize is pretty good accolades. But how can it match the de Tocqueville Award? Alfred Nobel was a great industrialist, but de Tocqueville was one of the greatest classical liberal thinkers in the 19th century. As a young man, de Tocqueville struggled to help develop a free society in Europe. He was alarmed by the dangers of government control. In 1831, at age 29, de Tocqueville came to America to observe a new, guess what, experiment. The experiment was American society, which was a democracy, decentralized and more egalitarian than European society. To de Tocqueville, America was an experiment in liberty. His book, Democracy in America, described America as the land in which the great experiment was to be made to conduct a society upon a new basis. I'm not sure that these days America is experimenting that much in government. When there are changes, they're usually very incremental. We need bolder proposals like Tim Draper's initiative to break California into multiple states to get more competition. This freedom to experiment by starting new businesses and closing old ones is, of course, the essence of capitalism and innovation. As the great economic historian Nathan Rosenberg reminded us, the West grew rich because it delegated to business enterprises the making of investment decisions such as which companies and which technologies need to be advanced and which need to die. Capitalism allows failures and rewards successes. With dynamic markets, we get to celebrate both. Failures help us learn. Successes provide the rewards necessary to keep experiments going. Vernon Smith remains a humble and grounded man, true to his roots on the Great Plains, ever curious to know more and ready to engage in dialogue across ideological divides. It is my great pleasure to present Vernon Smith with the Alexis de Tocqueville Award.
Thank you for this wonderful honor, David and David. It's just beautiful. I am really, it's incredible, okay? And I really very much appreciate. De Tocqueville was an incredible young, early 19th century scholar whose wisdom concerning his visit to America was truly astonishing. Thank you.
My name is Yeonmi Park. I was born in North Korea. I escaped when I was 13 years old. I escaped North Korea in 2007, and I lived as an illegal immigrant in China more than a year. After my father passed away in China, my mother and I decided to escape to Mongolia.
North Koreans are being terrorized today. We aren't free to sing, say, wear, or think what we want.
I really thought like Kim Jong-il can read my mind, and I thought like if I think of bad things, he's gonna kill me because he can read my thoughts.
No humans deserve to be oppressed just because of their birthplace.
They don't even know they have rights to be alive and to be happy. And I think that moment I really totally just lost my faith in humanity. I didn't know the concept. I never heard about the word freedom. To me was the happiest thing to me was having food. And that moment I thought we had to escape. There is no way we can survive in this country. We walked and crossed the Gobi Desert in the freezing winter night. And we followed the compass. And then later we could not use compass, so we followed the stars north into freedom. There are two things that I'm really grateful for to the world. The first thing was that I was born in North Korea and I escaped. And I've never tried this my experience to a normal life.
Good evening. I first would like to ask for your forgiveness. I'd ask you to please indulge me. I'd actually had prepared some remarks for this evening, but on reflection, they are simply insufficient for me to introduce Park Yeonmi, or as we know her, Yeonmi Park. Yeonmi Park was born into a life of starvation, sadness, hunger, a level of difficulty that is unimaginable to everyone in this room. Her life began to change when she was exposed to foreign media that had been smuggled into North Korea. At the age of 13, with her mother, they decided that they were going to give a try to a life somewhere else, a life in freedom, a life in a country that they could see, and they could see the lights in that country, and they wanted to experience what it was like to be in a place where you could actually have food. Yeonmi grew up eating insects. Some summers when there was simply no food, bark and grass was what she had to eat. So they put all of their resources together and they paid human traffickers to take them out of North Korea and into China. In China, they were separated. they didn't get to freedom. And I would break down sobbing if I was to describe to you the horrifying experiences that she lived through in China. Of course, they couldn't go back to North Korea, because if you actually are caught in China by the police, they sell you back to the North Koreans in exchange for timber. And in North Korea, you will be sent to a concentration camp where you will be worked to death. You will probably live between 5 and 10 more years before you die. And so she remained in China without her mother. If you take a look at Yeonmi Park in her 100 pounds and 5'3", you may actually be forgiven for thinking that Yeonmi is a weak person or she's frail. In fact, there is nothing frail or weak about Yeonmi Park. She found her mother, and together with a group of people, they walked the entire Gobi Desert with razors hidden in their clothing. If they were to be caught, they had agreed that they would kill themselves, because they certainly did not want to return either to what they were living through in China or in North Korea. And so this 13-year-old woman with an unbreakable will makes it to Mongolia, where, as they learned there, every North Korean is automatically a citizen of South Korea. The South Korean government asked for them to be brought to South Korea. And in South Korea, she was not content to just live a life in freedom. No, she was determined to tell her story, and she was determined that the world know what women go through in China and what life is like in North Korea. And so it starts with understanding that in order to tell her story, she had to learn English. And if you have had the privilege of meeting North Korean defectors, there's something about Yeonmi Park in the way that she's different from all North Korean defectors, in that her English is remarkably better than most North Korean defectors. The reason for this is because it was not enough for her to just learn English. This is a woman so determined that she wanted to learn English with a proper accent. So she watched, in South Korea, every episode of Friends 10 times. Or as she likes to tell me, take me to any quiz on Friends and I will win the prize. Yeonmi Park, as she was learning English, she was also doing something else. And again, many of you understand that the struggle for human rights in the world is truly a struggle between the biggest of all governments, a totalitarian police state, and a free or limited government, as we have been able to have in a handful of countries since the 18th century. She didn't just learn English. She read Bastiat. She read Friedman. She read von Mises. And so I think with that, and without going into further detail, I was, however, astonished at the level of ignorance that I've heard this evening from some folks on North Korea. And I would encourage you, the best way to understand the circumstances in a country is to learn the narrative of one single person. If you can, get her book. She's now a best-selling author in 32 languages. Her book is called In Order to Live, and it is a remarkable story. And it's a story of how she was unwilling to allow death and destruction dominion over her life and her liberty. And so with that, please rise and let's celebrate Yeonmi Park.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can all see me, since I'm very short and tiny. I blame North Korea to be this short. I always believe I'd become a model if I was born in America. I was very glad when we started the course. It was salad. Now I thought like, oh, I guess I'm American now. Because when I was in North Korea, salad was not something, it was a plant that I was feeding my rabbits. It was like rabbits' food. And when I came to the West, I was really offended. Why would they eat rabbits' food? It's so expensive. But I'm eating rabbits' food now. So that's how I know I'm adjusted to this country. Thank you. I just really, I really try not to become emotional because I really love my brother, Thor Harrison, because after I would been escaped, I felt like I would live 1,000 years. The hardest thing for me to overcome after get out from North Korea was that not learning about internet or smartphone or reading books. It was about trusting humanity again. When I escaped to China, the first thing that I saw was my mother raped. And in North Korea, we don't have sex education. So I did not know what kiss was. After she got raped, we found out that we had to be sold to live in China. China had one-child policy, and they did not keep enough girls, so there were not enough women could be married. So in the countryside, men with mental problem or physical issues, they cannot find wives. So my mother was being sold for $65, and I was sold for over $200. I was more expensive than her because I was virgin and I was young because I was 13. I completely lost my faith. I lived with a man who bound me, and I wanted to kill myself. And he told me that if I become his mistress, he could buy my mother back and could bring my father to me. So I had to become his mistress, and I had to become an adult. He did keep his promises. He brought my mother to me, and he did bring my father to me. It was during the time of Beijing Olympic in 2008. My father was around 45 years old. Now thinking that I never realized how young he was. He'd been tortured so much in prison camp in North Korea, so he got the colon cancer. In China, we don't have ID, so we could not go to hospital to treat him. So he had to just die. Until he was dying, he told me that you have to one thing promise me, that you are never going to kill yourself. Because he told me life is a gift, that I should never give up, because I tried to kill myself in front of him a few times. In North Korea, people die usually before 60 years old. We think of somebody who's in 50s, we think of them as grandpa and grandma, because no one lives that for long. We don't have enough things to eat. It breaks my heart that in the West, news is all about the politics. Even if you turn on CNN right now, news is about Kim Jong-un and politics. They talk about Kim Jong-un's haircut. They talk about how ridiculous his look is. And it's a very funny joke to Westerners. But North Korea is not about Kim Jong-un. It is not about nuclear weapon. It is about people like me, my mother, my father. There are more than 20 million people living there, not knowing that Americans are this great. I went to school in North Korea, but I'm never allowed to call you guys Americans. I had to call you all American bastards. It's like in math problem in North Korea, they call that there are 4 American bastards, and you kill 2 of them, there are how many American bastards left to kill? Then I say, 2 American bastards. That's why getting the information is so important. They don't know how diverse America is. They don't know that people here care about their rights and their liberty. Because of the people like Thor Harrison, my brother, and David, and like all of you, even though you have everything, even you have your own liberty, but you still care for the people who don't. Sometimes I feel very guilty because I know how much the meal that we just have cost. I know how much the hotel that I stayed last night cost. But at this point, in this night, when we have this gala, when the news talk about the politics, there are girls I sold for $100, $200. And I don't know, maybe justice alive in this room and in this country, but it is not to North Koreans. So I'm very grateful David and Mary brought me here, even though I don't speak good English. I'm in college right now learning about demand and supply graph. What an honor for me to be the Nobel Laureate economist. Life is a miracle that I saw that anything is possible in North Korea. And that's what I believe, the North Koreans will become free. And I really hope all of us have answered that day when they ask us, what have you done? Why we didn't have freedom and why we're starving to death? So thank you so much, everyone. I'm so sorry I made your night so dark. Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
I sold apples as a kid. And I sold oysters. And so I always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak in me.
We've been able to fund companies that are now worth tens of billions of dollars.
And those are Skype and Hotmail and Tesla. Those companies all took on industries where customers were getting really bad service at really high prices. The one that's the real big opportunity that I'm looking at now is government. That's where we get the worst service for the highest cost. You can actually run a much more fair and efficient and positive government if you think about all the new technologies that happen and apply those to government. And how the entrepreneur is approaching it is very important. Do they have some new technology to bring to bear? Our education system should be a changing, moving thing. I think people need to think in terms of change because change is happening faster and faster and faster. We all have to adapt faster and faster and faster. I want a school that breaks all of those standards and changes the way people learn, that focused on turning ordinary people with a special spark into great entrepreneurs. We don't teach history, we teach future. And so we get people thinking and anticipating what might be the next thing that happens. They need to get out there and do something extraordinary that they know is right, even if the world around them doesn't think so.
The countries of the world need to compete for you. Go out there and force your country, force your people to compete for you.
I love that I get this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite American bastards right there. But I actually do want to just say that, just to take a second and thank Yeonmi Park for her words. I think that actually how incredibly fortunate we are that she was willing to share just that intimate story. And I think that, you know, we live in such a great country that we forget how great it is. And it is, I just think it was an opportunity tonight for us to remind us what a great country this is. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to say that when David asked me about this opportunity to give this award to Tim, that my motivations were not quite so pure. You see, about 2 years ago, Tim gave me an award, and we had the whole thing scripted out. It was an interview and all these questions and filled them out, and we get up on stage, and he goes, I'm not going to ask any of these questions. You know what they say about payback, Tim? So, but how, for those of you who know Tim, how do you capture the essence of Tim Draper? Right? I feel like that's what I have to share here. And so, of course, I went to the internet and started just Googling around. And there were some good things that I found that I think captured part. You know, one description by a journalist is the rumpled tycoon with overgrown eyebrows. All right, we got that. You search the video Tim Draper VC, and it comes up, the naked VC, Tim Draper unveils his, ... which, oh, by the way, is a striptease, in case anybody would like to. It's about supporting women entrepreneurs. You'll have to go check it out. And here's another one. He doesn't touch alcohol, but often behaves like he is drunk. I mean, come on. Is that like Tim Draper or what? And I have to laugh because actually the story is that Tim's father and mother challenged him that he couldn't make it to 21 and gave an incentive if he didn't drink. And sure enough, Tim did. Now I'm just imagining him coming home from a prom, right? And they're like, Phyllis is saying, Bill, what do you think? Did he break the pledge or is that just him? But I have to tell you, Tim, you don't know this, but that inspired me. That story inspired me, and I offered my 5 children the same opportunity, and 1 out of 5 took it, and he made it. He's here tonight. He made it to when he's 21. And following in Tim's footsteps, he's decided to be an entrepreneur. He was a computer science major, and he's moving to Florida to open a rum distillery. I think there was something lost in the translation in my house. I'm not sure. No, but seriously, Tim is an incredible visionary, and you know, what is a visionary? It's somebody who really sees opportunity way before others see it. They commit themselves to it. They show passion around it, and they inspire others to follow. And they really play the long game because a true visionary sees it so much before the rest of us that they have to stick with it, and they sound a little bit crazy. And as a matter of fact, if you look at one of the videos, I think that was the #1 description of Tim as crazy. And it's because if you're ahead of these ideas, it seems crazy to a lot of people. De Tocqueville said, the health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens. And I have to say that the thing about the venture capital business is by its nature, it is a true catalyst to enable private citizens the freedom to control and to own their own destiny. And you know, you look at Tim, and of course we saw the companies he's invested in, which are now probably old line companies when you think of Skype and Tesla and Hotmail, because all the other ones he's investing in, we haven't even heard of yet, except for Bitcoin and how it's going to change Indonesia. We got that. But Tim didn't settle with just being an investor, right? Tim, always going against the crowd, actually kind of where most venture capitals moved upstream to make bigger investments later stage, he moved down the line and actually said, you know what, I'm going to get to these entrepreneurs even earlier, and created the Draper University, which is a global university, and right here in the Bay Area, gets kids from all over who they have ideas and energy, and he mentors them. And every day they say a pledge, and the opening line of the pledge is, I will promote freedom at all costs, because the ability to try new things without government interference is paramount to the success of an innovative community and a society that offers opportunities to more than just the favored few. And it is that freedom that Tim has always been so passionate about. But what was actually even more impressive to me was that if you, Melissa shared with me some letters and some of the alumni comments, and just how much these guys so are connected to Tim and appreciate all that he's done. And actually, I'm going to share with you one email where a graduate said, "The purpose of this email is to thank you for Survival Week. On Thursday, I brought out my survival instinct when I found myself in the middle of a terrorist attack in Barcelona. Survival Week gave me the courage and strength to survive this terrible situation. God told me it wasn't my time to go yet because I'm off to change the world." And if you think about that, just the fact that with such a dramatic event in that person's life, to actually go back and say, "Tim, thank you," it was those lessons that you taught me through this program that were so important. And then continuing to move further downstream, Tim has created BizWorld, which I've had the privilege of being a little bit of a part of, which is at elementary and high school kids. And it's now, I think, in 100 countries. And I got to actually interview some of these kids who they set up sort of their own business. So it's really to teach entrepreneurship to these kids who often have no role model exposing them to it. And I had to laugh when I asked a sixth grader who was the CEO, what was the hardest part of your job? And she said, "Oh, it's they all disagree and I have to be the one to make the decision." And then when I asked the head of, I think he was like the head of manufacturing or whatever, because they make these bracelets, the little boy said, "It's just so hard. I don't know whether I should go with quality or quantity." So what was amazing and struck me is that the lessons of that entrepreneurship could be learned so young and I actually thought Harvard Business School was going to be in trouble because they probably learned it all in the 4-day session. But then kind of that third pillar, if you think of sort of, in creating environment for private wealth to be created is, one is the money, two is the mentorship, but also to really take an active role in making sure that government is not inhibiting opportunity, but is actually helping. And, Tim is not one to shy away. When in 2012, California did the retroactive tax, Tim will tell you that his phone voicemail was filled in emails with people complaining about leaving, and he decided, "I'm not leaving, I'm actually going to put something on the ballot and fight this," and had his initiative to divide California in 6 states, which many laughed at, but it ended up being a great conversation. But for those who don't know, he just filed again, I think in August, for 3 states. And that is a key lesson with Tim, because again, he plays the long game. So I'm going to share one last story, and that is that actually, as an early stage investor, this guy showed promise very, very early, because what's the most important investment you make is the choice of your spouse. And he met Melissa before he could drive. I believe she drove on their first dates, and decided that she was the right one, and he was not going to wait and let anybody else scoop her up. And so they have been together since then. And he gave advice to a friend of mine who said, "What's the key to a successful marriage?" And he said, "Look, here's the deal. Just let your wife make all the little decisions. She'll feel very empowered. Just let her make all those little decisions." And when my friend said, "Okay," and he goes, "And you save the big decisions for you. That's the key. You control the big decisions." And when he said, "Well, how many big decisions have you had to make?" Tim said, "Fortunately, none have been required." So again, playing the long game. Well, it is my great honor and pleasure to present that award to Tim Draper.
Well, this is great. First, I want to thank the Independent Institute. They are tireless in their efforts to promote liberty and freedom, and they work day and night and it's a singular purpose, and they drive it, and they have done such an outstanding job. And I remember saying to David, look, David, we need to get this word out. And he says, well, you know, they write a lot of books. And then, you know, I said, well, you know, how many books do they usually sell? Well, you know, 100, 1,000. And so I said, well, you got to do something else. And he comes to me with this Love Gov thing. Love Gov. Have you guys seen it? 6 million people have seen Love Gov. 8 million. 8 million people have seen Love Gov. It's a little on YouTube. It's just hilarious, but it gets that boom, that message across that freedom is really important. It's a little bit of a satire. I also want to thank my wife, Melissa, who has been introduced already, and she has hung in there with me when everyone else in the world regularly says something to her like, you married that guy, he's crazy. And that's sort of a regular occurrence, and she kind of, you know, being a great supportive wife, she often says yes, but sometimes she says, just wait. You'll come around. And thank you to my mom and dad. They are here and supporting me, and they've supported me through many, many events. Dad's been a great role model to me. He's an early pioneer in venture capital. And my mom is, I got a little story about Mom, and that's coming. But I also want to thank my team over here. Thank you all for showing up. Good support. I appreciate it. And Karen Mostis, who is just a delight and does extraordinary things. And I also want to acknowledge, you know, we talk about politics and how you can change it, and you vote for somebody else, and you know, hey, can we get this person in, and you know, can we shrink the bureaucracy, and what can we do to make our government better? There's a table right here that is focused on an entirely new world, and it's coming because of the blockchain and Bitcoin, and they are, we have Tezos represented and Credo represented, and they have a way, I mean, you guys are fighting for this freedom thing, right? They have a way to bank the unbanked, they have a way of insuring the uninsurable, and they have a way of testing new forms of government through these new tokens. So I just wanted to acknowledge them. They are awesome. They're doing really great work. Tezos, Credo, all you guys, Avish, thank you. And Jared, who's my lawyer, and Dad went up and said, oh, Jared, thanks for keeping my son out of jail. So here's the story. People say, how did this all happen? How did you get this way? In fact, David Teese met me for the first time, and we went on his boat last night. And he said, how did this all start? And I told him, oh, well, it was because something else. And I thought deeply about it, and it all started with picking apples. So I have an apple here. My mom, thank you, Mom, was always encouraging me to just sort of get out. And my allowance was 10 cents a week. And baseball cards were about 50 cents a pack. So I'd have to wait 5 weeks. So I was always looking for ways to make money. And so I picked these apples, and I took them. We have a 1/4 mile long driveway, and I carried the apples to the street, and I just sat out there for weeks at a time selling the apples. And the apples were 5 cents a piece, and I sold the apples, and the next day I'd pick some more apples, I'd bring them out there, and I'd sell them on the street. And every once in a while, there'd be a friend who'd come by and say, hey, what, you still selling those apples? Oh, yeah, still selling the apples. Another friend would come by, still selling the apples? Yeah, oh, yeah, still selling the apples. And then they'd sit with me for a while, sell a few apples, and then they get bored and they go. And I'd just stay at it. And then we were closing up. The season was over and we were closing up shop. And my good friend's mother, who I loved, came up and said, well, so how much money did you make? And I said, look, it's $7. And she said, well, how many people helped you? And I said, well, yeah, some people came through and helped, and and I said, well, Cree did, and Will did, and Paul did, and Blaine Gibson, and a couple others, and they added up to 7, and she took the $7 and she gave me $1, and then she said, well, we'll give each of you $1. And so I learned what socialism was. And I didn't like it. And I knew there was a better system. And then at one time, I got a little older and I got arrested for something I didn't do. And I started to think, these people, they're older and they're like, they've got the badges and they've got the credibility and all that stuff. They're not right. And I started to think maybe there are better ways to do things. And that got me into entrepreneurship and venture capital and pushing for new changes where things were wrong. It got me very interested in education because I thought, well, wait, people need to learn this stuff. And so that's why I pushed for the school voucher initiative. That's why I started BizWorld. That's why I started Draper University of Heroes. That's why I wanted to end the monopoly that is California. I am looking for those things that are going to make it so we can progress faster. And somewhat like Elon Musk, one of my heroes, I'm also thinking, hey, we need to progress at a fast rate. I had a 5th grade teacher who said, the world, she said, the world is going to come to an end in something like 10,000 years. And I said, what? Like she believed that an asteroid was going to hit it and it was going to come to an end. I've taken that to heart and I think we need to progress, not only save this planet, but get off this planet. And progress is everything. And we progress because of people like you who are driving for freedom and independence and doing really cool things. And there is an item of friction to that, and that friction is all the heavy government, because you end up, throughout history, if a government spends 10 to 20% of your GDP, your progress grows at about somewhere around 10%. If government grows at if government spending is more than 30%, and now our government spending is almost 50%, then growth slows and you end up growing at 2 or 3%. This is really important. And so I hope you will all take it to heart and take it and try to drive it so that we get our government back to 10 to 20%. And I think that's going to be a great thing. So with that, I really want to thank you all for this award, and I'll take a bite of the apple.
The mission of the Independent Institute is to boldly advance peaceful, prosperous, and free societies, grounded in a commitment to human worth and dignity.
Over 30 years, we've been privileged to work with really excellent people, including many scholars who've done seminal work in issue after issue. It could be on the environment, or healthcare, or finance, or economics. And we've produced books that have been the bedrock of these different areas, and they have enduring value. It then promotes and inspires other ways of thinking and other people to do more and to look and see what's possible.
From its start in 1986 as the first garage think tank, Independent has taken on the most important challenges of the day and proposed innovative solutions to seemingly intractable problems. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, Independent offered guidance to Eastern European countries moving beyond communism, supported the efforts of Chinese dissidents, helped prevent unaffordable centralized health care, and offered criminal justice solutions. In the 2000s, Independent established a program advancing solutions for national security while preserving peace and liberty in the aftermath of 9/11, pioneered enterprise-based approaches to fighting poverty, designed practical, affordable housing policies for America, and expanded its program of market-based solutions to resolve the crisis of healthcare access and cost. Independent's important work continues today with a Millennial Outreach Initiative that builds on the success of the award-winning LoveGov YouTube series and a focus on building innovative, entrepreneurial solutions to today's most pressing problems.
I believe the coming years are going to be pivotal for protecting our freedoms, especially for coming generations. And if you want to connect and influence the debate among different types of people, you need to go where they go, and you have to be sensitive to the questions that they have.
Through research and examples, the Independent Institute is leading the way in showing how new technology can transform and transcend government and improve people's lives. So the future of research at the Independent Institute and entrepreneurship will be focused on education, healthcare, technology, national security, but especially how new technology impacts all of those areas.
Independent presents a forward-looking, optimistic, and solutions-oriented vision. Our innovative alternatives challenge political agendas rooted in fear, and they advance opportunity, focusing on the worth of every individual. By applying independent thinking to issues that matter, we create transformational ideas for today's most pressing social and economic challenges. And by connecting these ideas with organizations and networks, we can inspire action that will unleash an era of unparalleled human flourishing at home and around the globe. Be part of this movement. Join Independent Institute now and help us inspire the generations of today and those to come.
Video? Am I live? I am live, okay. You have met our panel already. They don't need to be reintroduced. And on the note of optimism sounded in that video, I have a question for each of you, but I have one question for all of you. And it is, what is the most hopeful trend that you see right now in the world? And Vernon, we'll start with you, age before beauty.
Oh, what's a hopeful trend in this sorry-ass world? Now, that's a challenge, PJ. Well, I tell you, I will say that I'm not nearly as pessimistic as most people are. And partly because I've been around 9 decades. And you get to see a lot of crap if you live to be 90. And really the challenges to freedom started 10 years before I was born. I knew about it because it impacted people then. I was born in 1927. Well, in 1917 and 18, we had the Espionage Act. and the Sedition Act.
The Alien and Sedition Act all over again under President Wilson.
And so now we're seeing that again. Well, but I tell you why I'm hopeful. The Sedition Act, which made it illegal to say anything defamatory toward the United States government, the Constitution, the American flag, the uniform, the military, all of those things made it illegal. There was over 2,000 people prosecuted under the Sedition Act. Well, in 1921, less than 3 years after it was passed, it was voted down. We got rid of it. That's how fast things changed, because there was such a revulsion to the carnage of the First World War that all of that, and it was an unpopular war. That's one reason why, 2,000 people went to jail because of war protests. So that, we always managed to muddle through. And I think in America there really is a deep sense that of what we really stand for, and that somehow that eventually bleeds through in spite of the assaults on it, the assaults on freedom, and of course now we're having assaults on the whole idea of immigration, both legal and illegal immigration, and yet that's exactly what has made America what it is, one of the many things. And, and
otherwise we would have nothing to eat except white bread and Velveeta.
Yes.
If it were not for immigrants.
Yes.
Although the Irish didn't really contribute much from a culinary point of view.
Well, now you got to be careful here. My ancestors were Irish, English and Irish, but I remember the Irish better.
Have more vegetables that have been boiled for hours and hours. So there we have the muddle through factor, always leading to hope. Yeonmi, what is the most hopeful trend you see at the moment?
So I came to America officially last January to start university in New York. I think that was when the election time. And I asked everyone, is this a normal election? Is this how things are like?
Yeah, they're all like that.
And people told me, yeah, this is really not normal. But to me, it's still great because I had a really bad comparison to what you have here. So, when I was in North Korea, I did not learn about any history. I learned that Kim Il-sung ended World War II, and he freed the whole humanity. And of course, I did not learn about science, Big Bang. I learned that Kim Il-sung created a language, and it's just very different a subject. So I had to catch up with a lot of things. I read Jane Austen, of course Bastia, and it was very helpful to me that I think the idea of democracy or liberty or even human rights, even animals' rights, it's our new convention that as we moved forward, we learned all these things and we created these things. So it is quite stark to think about North Korea, how their time is going back while we are moving forward in this world. But in the big spectrum that all the communism countries, almost all of them fair, that lie doesn't have power. And that's what I believe in, that justice will win, and that's also why I think North Korea gonna change. People will see the truth.
Well, I'm glad that you found, I mean, you kind of caught us at a bad moment. Democracy has its little ups and downs. But you found even our low ebb to be hopeful.
Still great, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's a very good thing.
Thank you.
Tim, what about you? What do you find most hopeful?
Well, I am really optimistic about the transformations of governments because we're all interconnected and we are all distributed now. I'm optimistic about the blockchain because it's this perfect ledger, which means it can do most of the things that the bureaucrats do today. So they're very concerned about the computer, AI putting them out of jobs. Yeah, it's government jobs that can be replaced, and any job that's repetitive can be replaced. Here's the other thing I'm really optimistic about. Geographic borders are falling, and all of these guys playing the big global chess game, about who's going to be able to take who with guns, they're missing the whole battle. The game is really up in it's electronic. It's all in the cyber world, and we are now all a part of one world. So if you don't like the country you're in, you can move to another country. We're much more mobile than we ever were. Now, it's hard for you, but most of the people of the world can move. And if they can move, they're going to leave a bad government, or they're going to try to overthrow it. And even the good governments are going to have to compete for us. They're going to have to become accountable to us. And so I'm very optimistic about government right now. I'm also very optimistic about wealth, global wealth, because we used to carry around shells, and then it was like precious metals, and then it was a promise of a precious metal, and then it was like a promise of Federal Reserve note. Well, now we're one level more abstract than that with Bitcoin, and we can now, if you guys are really freedom fighters, you should all be owning Bitcoin. It is the free currency. It is out there, and you can go from country to country, and you can pull down your Bitcoin off the cloud. This is a new world. Sure, there's uncertainty. A lot of people used it for nefarious purposes, but this is fantastic for anybody who's thinking for liberty and freedom and for global wealth. We're now able to tap into 4 billion people that were unbanked before, and now they can be a part of the global economy. This is really amazing.
Well, your answer happens to lead right into my specific question to you, so I'm just going to keep with you because one of the things I wanted to ask you was that things like Bitcoin, the whole sort of tech world and the computer world, does this digital enterprise, does this offer, well, I know you're going to say yes, but I'd like to know what kind of yes. Does this offer special advantages to people in the underdeveloped world, partly developed places around the world, people who have historically lacked capital, access to markets, marketable goods and services?
Sure, yeah, of course it does, because if you have $7.33, this is worth trying. Go to the bank. Go to Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Citibank and walk in to the teller and say, I'd like to set up a bank account for $7.33. They will shove you out the door. And the reason they'll shove you out the door is that it costs them $200 just to regulate your account. And so if that's going to be the case, then the unbanked are farther and farther away from that first rung of the ladder. And Bitcoin suddenly just cleared the decks for that and made it so anyone can participate in this global economy. And you see the bankers starting to notice that that people are moving. I was talking to my wealth advisor, and he said, I was selling a bunch of stuff.
I have a poverty advisor.
I was selling some stock, and he said, "Oh, you're moving it to crypto too." And they are panicking, and so you're seeing a concerted attack on Bitcoin going on right now. Watch for it. And they're saying, this is a fraud. This is whatever. Short the banks, guys.
Short the banks. Okay, there's some more. So, Yeonmi, that was a very interesting part of your story. Was that correct me if I'm wrong here, but I understand that one of your first glimpses of freedom was a pirated copy of the movie Titanic. Yes. And that this really changed your thinking. And I was thinking, well, as great cultural milestones go, about 2/3 of the way through, I was yelling at the screen, "Send down for more ice." Wasn't a masterpiece, but it got me thinking about how such a relatively minor thing like that could have such a major effect. And can you give us maybe some other examples of just how such a minor glimpse into another world can help change people's thinking?
So, thank you. So in North Korea, we don't have magazines. I did not know the word of magazine. So when I came to America at the Walmart, I was very shocked at how many types of magazines. And I was even more shocked when I heard the magazine called the Playboys. Like, really? So we have none of those. I did not know what designer was. We don't know even like celebrity names. We don't have religion. Our religion is our dictator, like Kim's. They are our gods. And there's no outside information. We have only one channel on TV, but that we don't really have 24 hours electricity. So even that we cannot really see. But even if you see, it's all propaganda. And as I said, like they don't teach us Shakespeare. We don't know what Romeo and Juliet is. Like the concept of love in North Korea is a very shameful thing. And they don't even teach us what the meaning of love, word meaning is. So if you have read the book 1984 by George Orwell, he talks about the language, how important it is to know the language. That means you know the concept. But in North Korea, they purposely didn't make the words like love. We only understand love something as like we love government. We love our Kim Il-sung, but we don't know that I can say to my mother, I love her. We don't have the word for human rights and like liberty. There are so many words that we don't have. So in that situation, the outside information is the only way we get to know what's happening outside of the world. So in North Korea, they tell us, the rest of the world is like disastrous. They are like American monsters, and the people are starving. The capitalism is such a bad thing that we are so lucky to be in North Korea. So when I was young, our people somehow they smuggle this information from China, and they see these things. And sometimes people even get executed for watching a movie. But even that, we still risk our life to know the truth. And that, for me, was the movie that gave me some taste of freedom was actually Titanic. I mean, when I was watching Titanic, I was really thinking, why someone made a movie out of this such a shameful story? Why there's no propaganda in the movie? And I thought, really, the DiCaprio and the movie director got executed, so...
I was really thinking, when I escaped, that's the first thing I checked. Is he alive? My jag is alive. And so, but this information gives them like that we can die for something else other than the regime. To me, that dying for the dear leader was the greatest thing that I could do with my life. That become a revolutionary, not being an individual. But in that movie, that people can love somebody else and they can die for it, they can value different things. So my mother was a really big fan of pro wrestling, WWF. So I literally thought, men in America are that muscly. And when I came here, I was like, what's wrong with you guys? This is not how I thought about Americans. So even though these little pieces of information that North Korean people might not able to comprehend, whole thing that how much we have in this world, but it still gives them the idea that there's something might be wrong, and they might be able to live like us someday. So I think this is gonna be the game changer when we free North Korea. So even imagine right now that there's a miracle that we remove the dictator, we remove those power controlling group, but the people believe that Kim Jong-il can read their mind, and they believe that we are monsters here. What are we gonna do? So the most important thing to me is that free their minds, because North Korean people are not only imprisoned physically, but they are imprisoned mentally, they're emotionally. So there are a lot of NGOs are doing this. During the Soviet Union, we send balloons to each other, leaflets, share the information to each other. There are people smuggling information to North Korea right now. So I hope you can all involve with this some way, because this is something that we all can contribute without being involved in politics.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We underrate the power of our popular culture, and I'm gonna go back and watch Titanic with more patience. My wife and I were dating then when the movie came out, and it was like, she's in tears and I'm going, I know how this ends. This time I'll have a little more respect for it. And Vernon, to round up the evening, you've done all this wonderful work about really the power of entrepreneurship, the power of the market. And are there limits to the power of the market? And are we anywhere near or even within shouting distance of
No, there's no limits. I think that, markets are the foundation of specialization. The fact that, we can all go off and do our own individual, engage in individual activities that suit our tastes and that suit our skills, and from the world economy, earn income and buy everything else we need that's produced by others. We all, as Hayek once said, we're all vitally dependent upon the knowledge that we don't have, that other people have. And we benefit from that knowledge primarily through the pricing system. That's the system that organizes all this dispersed activity to make us better off, and yet there's nobody in charge.
Right.
And no, I see no end to that. It's getting, and now with technology, you see, and the growth of the social media, isn't it interesting that with all of the markets and development and specialization and wealth creation, the demand for sociability was never greater. We still need each other. And And so
It's a lonely planet out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the social media has taken off in ways that you see, and that's a way of linking us together in a more personal way.
Sometimes a little too personal.
Yeah.
Anthony Weiner found out.
Yeah. So I don't see any limit. In fact, it's.
So where would you say a couple of places are? We'll kind of wrap up the evening with this, and so that everybody can go get drunk, as befits the libertine side of libertarianism. Where are a couple of places where markets could be applied in the field of things government controls? Where could markets? Where are a couple of places markets could be used to our advantage?
Oh, I think the interstate highway system ought to be privatized. You know, it's a. You know, the governments can build highways, but they can't fix the potholes.
No, no, they can't.
And so, but you just think about it. You see, building a highway to the average congressman or senator, that gets a lot of publicity, brings money into his jurisdiction, but they don't think ahead about how to maintain.
Oh, I think it's worse than not thinking ahead. I think they deliberately don't do. You see it all over Latin America, Brasilia, all these incredible constructions that have not been maintained at all. And that's because all the public gratitude, all the hero worship, and all the glory
is in the front end.
Is in the front end,
yes,
right?
And
because it's not a business, they deliberately ignore the maintenance budget.
Yeah.
So no, I think it's worse than negligent. I think it's wicked.
No, I agree. And you know, we've got, of course, gasoline tax is supposed to be for maintaining the road system.
Right.
But they spend it on other things.
Bicycle racks.
Yeah, because that's a fund that it's easy to raid and use for other purposes.
Yes.
And so now we got to raise, in California, we got to raise the gas tax to do what we already should have funded, namely fixing the highways. So I would privatize them almost overnight. They would become toll roads.
Yeah.
And I think there's all kinds with private capital and entrepreneurship. People can find all kinds of innovative ways to use that right away.
In the Italian autostrada is privatized, and when you pull off into the service station, instead of getting a lot of the same hideous food that was at the last rest stop, you get real Italian cooking and a glass of wine.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
and you can spend the whole afternoon at the highway rest stop. Comfort and delight. Well, thank all of you very much, and all of you even more. I think it's been a wonderful evening. I can only speak for myself, but I hope I'm speaking for the rest of you.
Hi there. It's been a long evening, but before we adjourn, I just wanted to spend a minute to quickly sketch out an opportunity for all of us that I think could be quite significant. Our political system today is an interesting one in the sense that it's become obviously seriously polarized. And it's become polarized in part because both sides of the political spectrum have fallen into what I would describe as a threat-based narrative. Depends on which side of the aisle you're on, but the key is the enemy is upon us. It's about to attack, and we're all going to die unless we mobilize quickly to fight the enemy. It's all about the threat. And I think in that kind of environment, it becomes hugely dysfunctional. But at the same time, it creates an opportunity for what I would describe as an opportunity-based narrative. What about if instead of focusing on threat, we started to describe a narrative, an opportunity that has to do with cultivating environments that help all of us to achieve much more of our potential. That kind of opportunity could bring us together rather than pulling us apart. I think one of the reasons I've become so interested in opportunity-based narratives is because I've studied across history and across geographies successful movements for change and for liberty. I actually participated in a number of movements. I have the distinction, for those of you who can remember back that far. In college, I was the chapter head of the Young Americans for Freedom on my college campus. Thank you. And at the same time, I was the chapter head of the Students for a Democratic Society chapter on my campus. So I've participated in a few movements throughout my life. But what I find interesting is that no matter what the geography, no matter what the period of time, every successful movement has had two elements that came together. One was a powerful opportunity-based narrative that mobilized and inspired people to act. And the second was a form of organization, a way of organizing that activity into small groups. All the successful movements basically had a cellular structure. They were organized around small cells, 5 to 15 people that would come together. And these weren't just reading circles or discussion groups. These were groups that were focused on learning through action. And they would hold each other accountable. They would meet on a very frequent basis, typically at least once a week, if not several times a week. And one of the key questions is, what have you done? What action have you taken? What have you learned from it? And the groups also became support groups. Obviously, you're going to run into frustrations and challenges along the way, and the group would help to prop you up and say, let's keep moving. It's important. And in the process, these groups would develop really deep trust-based relationships with each other in the group, 5 to 15 people. And then the groups were connected through networks, so they would scale over time, but the core unit was that cell. And I think some of the keys to success as you look at these movements and the formation of these cells is, first of all, to focus on early wins. It's very hard to sustain momentum and enthusiasm unless you can show some impact pretty quickly. So starting with some early wins, focusing on the local community. I wouldn't say that these small groups should focus on ending the Fed as their first action. Find something in the local community where you can have impact and start to demonstrate the potential of coming together. There's a second element of achieving leverage. These small groups are very active in reaching out and connecting with other groups in their community that may not share their entire worldview, but on a particular issue are willing to participate, to act, and get change to happen. And then these groups start to connect across issues, so they don't just become one-issue groups. They start to see a broader perspective and the need for broader change. But I'd say that if we want to achieve more impact, I'd ask all of you to ask the question, who can I connect with? 5, 15 people. Who can I connect with on a regular basis to start to act? I believe that fundamental change is not going to come from ideas from the ivory tower. It's not going to come from lobbying within the Beltway. It's not to dismiss those activities, but it's not going to come from there. My belief is that fundamental change is going to come from mobilizing Main Street. And until and unless we find a way to mobilize Main Street through an opportunity-based narrative and through starting to form into these small groups and cells of action, it's going to be very difficult to get the change that we all want. Now, if any of you are interested in creating some of these communities of impact, we're actually organizing a meeting here in San Francisco on October 19th. And I believe if on the screen maybe they'll show the email. If you're interested in participating in that group that evening of October 19th, just send an email to impact@independent.org, and we'll send you an invite and welcome you to join the group and start action. Thank you very much.
It's been a long evening, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I want to take this opportunity to extend our heartfelt gratitude for your kindness and generosity and participation in joining with us in making our 30th Anniversary Gala for the Future of Liberty possible and a great success. Thank you for all coming and making tonight, I think, a beginning as well. We look forward to the opportunity of your participation in the Independent Institute in the future, and we welcome your ideas and impact of how we should do so. God bless you all, safe travels, and good night.